The plateau rose out of the savannah like the spine of some ancient, sleeping creature. Wind carved it day by day, century by century, leaving behind strange stone formations, towering monoliths, narrow arches, collapsed pillars half consumed by dust. Local tribes called them the memory stones because they believed each rock preserved a moment in the land's distant past. But this year, the ground surrounding the stones behaved strangely. It no longer remembered weight. Footprints faded too fast. Dust didn't settle the same way. The earth felt hollow beneath the hoof. And the first to feel these changes was a solitary black rhino named Endoro. Endoro was enormous even for his species, with thick folds of armor-like skin and a horn curved upward like a blade sharpened by a god. Age had carved notches into that horn, reminders of battles against hyenas, poachers, even another bull long ago. His stride was heavy, his breath slow and deliberate, his ears constantly swiveling for danger or secrets. The morning sun lay pale across the plateau. It should have warmed the stones into deep colours of clay and rust, but instead the light slid over them like cold water, leaving their surfaces dull and lifeless. The shadows too seemed hesitant, thin and weak, as if the sun wasn't strong enough to define the world fully. Endoro climbed the slope that led to the highest cluster of stones. His feet pressed into the dusty ground, but the dust rose in a curious, unnatural puff that lingered too long in the air before sinking back down. The soil felt loose, unanchored, as if it had forgotten how to hold weight. Endoro snorted. He didn't trust changes he couldn't see. He tested the earth again. Same result. The ground beneath the plateau was sick. He walked on anyway. From atop the ridge, the savannah stretched below him, golden, broad, alive with distant herds of zebra and wildebeest. But few dared approach the stones. Even predators avoided this area. Too exposed, too strange, too old. Endoro moved between two monoliths, their surfaces carved with lines that might have been erosion, or something else. His horn brushed against the stone, scraping lightly. A whisper of dust fell, and beneath the dust lay a deep, ancient groove. He paused. Around him, the air held an unusual stillness. Not silence, he could hear insects, distant birds, wind whistling through the rocks, but stillness, as if the land was trying not to disturb him, or trying not to disturb something below. Endoro lowered his head to sniff a patch of dry grass. It should have smelled of brittle roots and baked earth, but instead it carried a faint mineral scent. Metallic, sour, wrong. His ears twitched. From far west came the low rumble of engines. Endoro turned sharply. Along the horizon, dust clouds rose behind a convoy of armoured vehicles, 3 supply trucks and 2 ranger jeeps. The convoy moved with urgency, bouncing across uneven ground. Endoro recognized the scent of diesel and hot metal. He recognized too the tension carried by the humans when they approached in such numbers. Something had brought them here, something serious. He stepped behind a stone pillar, watching. The convoy stopped at the base of the plateau. Rangers spilled out, men and women in green uniforms, rifles slung over shoulders, binoculars raised. They spoke quickly, pointing not at the stones, but at the ground around them. Endoro listened. He did not understand words, but he understood tone, urgency, worry, fear. 2 scientists exited one of the trucks, a geologist named Leon and a wildlife technician named Kabiru. Leon knelt at the soil, scooping a handful into a plastic bag, her brow furrowed. Kabiru checked a handheld sensor that beeped in uneven intervals. A ranger approached them. "What's the reading?" Kabiru shook his head slowly. "Unstable. Entire sublayer is shifting. It's losing compaction. If something heavy crosses the wrong spot..." "It will collapse?" the ranger asked. "Or worse," Leon murmured. "It will liquefy." The ranger frowned. Liquefy? Like mud? Kabiru stared at the ground. No. Like sand that forgets it's supposed to hold together. Endoro tensed. He didn't understand the science, but he understood danger in earth beneath his feet. He stepped slowly away from the edge. A gust of wind swept across the plateau, lifting dust. The dust swirled upward unnaturally, forming tiny spirals that danced for several seconds before falling. The ground trembled faintly, not enough for humans to notice, but enough for Endoro to feel through the pads of his feet. He retreated toward the monoliths. Below, Lian looked up sharply. Did anyone else feel that? The stones shifted. The ranger beside her shook his head. No tremor detected. Lian narrowed her eyes. It wasn't a tremor, it was resonance. From above, Endoro snorted. He pressed his horn against the nearest stone, feeling for vibration. The stone hummed faintly, an ancient tone locked deep within its body. And then a sharp crack echoed behind him. Endoro spun. A zebra mare on the lower slope had stepped onto a patch of ground that gave way beneath her hooves. She staggered, struggling as the soil crumbled into a shallow sinkhole forming beneath her. Her herd scattered in alarm. Rangers rushed toward the zebra, shouting. They pulled ropes from a truck, preparing a rescue. The mare screamed, a shrill, panicked cry, as she sank up to her knees in collapsing soil. Endoro stood frozen, ears flat, watching. The ground wasn't absorbing weight anymore, it was erasing it. The soil below the plateau behaved like memory-sick earth, unable to recall its shape, unable to support creatures it had supported for millennia. Some deep layer had been disturbed, eroded, emptied. Amina, another ranger, arrived breathless. We found drilling sites, Lian. Illegal ones. They tapped into ground pockets that feed this plateau. Lian's face went pale. Did they pump anything out? Amina swallowed. Yes, they extracted mineral-rich water from under the stone fields for months, maybe longer. Kabiru exhaled. They drained the sublayer. The ground lost density. It doesn't remember weight because it doesn't have any left. The rangers worked frantically to save the zebra, but Endoro knew something else. A rhino's weight was 10 times more dangerous here. He needed to leave, and he needed to make sure other animals did too. He turned, but froze again. Because from the far side of the plateau came the faint clatter of metal. Poachers. 2 of them, dressed in desert camouflage, carrying bags heavy with tools, ropes, metal spikes. Their eyes locked onto Endoro, their faces hardened with recognition and hunger. A black rhino was a payday worth killing for. Endoro pawed the ground, snorting thunderously. The earth trembled beneath him, but the tremble meant danger, not strength. One poacher raised a rifle. Another circled toward the east side, cutting off escape. Endoro backed toward the stones. The poachers followed, confident, steady, unaware that the ground around them was a living trap. Then the first shot rang out. Dirt exploded near Endoro's foot. He bolted. The poachers chased him aggressively. Too aggressively. They fired again, hitting stone. The plateau boomed like thunder. And then, the earth beneath the poacher's feet gave way. He disappeared into the collapsing soil with a scream swallowed by dust. The second poacher froze. Too late. The ground opened beneath him as well, folding inward like a dying lung. Endoro stopped running. He turned back, snorting hard, staring at the wounded earth that had swallowed the threat. Rangers heard the shouts, sprinting toward the site. Amina gasped. Sinkholes! Kabiru! Seal off the upper ridge! But Endoro had already moved to the highest stone, standing tall, looking down upon the plateau as if judging the land. The stones did not move, they did not tremble, they did not remember weight, but they remembered silence. And Endoro stood among them, a living reminder of what the land once held steady. As rangers worked desperately below, as soil shifted and dust rose and the sun dimmed behind passing clouds, Endoro lifted his head. He listened. The ground below whispered a warning. What has been taken must be returned, or the land will continue to forget. and a rhino cannot walk a world that forgets how to hold him. Night rolled over the plateau in a slow, uneven crawl, as if even darkness wasn't sure it wanted to settle on a land that no longer behaved like land. The sun dipped behind distant hills, abandoning the sky to a flat blue-grey haze. Stars blinked into existence, distorted slightly by swirling dust. The ground still whispered beneath the surface, shifting, settling, forgetting. Endoro stayed near the ancient stones long after the poachers vanished into the earth. His ears twitched at every tremor. His nostrils flared with every change in the wind. His massive silhouette cast a broken shadow across the monoliths. Rhinos rarely stood still this long, but nothing about this night was normal. Below the plateau, rangers worked under harsh floodlights mounted on jeeps. Their voices drifted upward, short, sharp, anxious. Sinkhole swallowed 2, one's still alive, call rescue. Grounds collapsing on the west side, mark that area. Where's the geologist? We need depth readings. Lian and Kabiru knelt beside a seismograph hurriedly assembled from portable parts. Kabiru wiped dust from the screen. It displayed jagged, erratic lines. Too unstable, he muttered. If these dips widen, the entire plateau could slide. Lian exhaled through her teeth. Because someone drained the aquifer that held the sublayer together. The stones were resting on compacted sediment. Now there's nothing to support them. Amina approached, flashlight beams slicing through dust clouds. What happens if the central stones shift? Lian looked at her sharply. They weigh thousands of tons. They don't fall, they displace. They'll take half the slope with them. Amina's face hardened, including every animal in the valley below. Kabiru pointed north. Look, herds already sense it. On the savanna beyond the plateau, zebra herds moved in uneasy clusters. They lifted heads toward the stones, then toward each other, as if trying to decide where safety remained. Wildebeest gathered tightly, snorting, pacing in tight circles. Even the distant giraffes paced nervously. Endoro watched them all from above, silent, immovable. Behind him, the stones hummed faintly, a resonance carried through the wind. They were not supernatural, but old rocks do remember vibrations, weight, and pressure, and these stones had not felt the earth this fragile in thousands of seasons. The first shift. Endoro lifted one heavy foot, set it down. The earth sagged beneath him. He froze. The sag was slight, only a fraction of an inch, but it was wrong. Rhinos had walked these stones for generations during dry seasons. The plateau never moved. He backed up slowly, instinct screaming. Below, Kabiru noticed. The rhino! He's too close to the compromised zone. Amina sprinted forward, arms waving. Hey! Hey! Go! Move! Endoro watched her from above but didn't understand the gestures. Lian cursed. The ground right under him is hollowing out. If he takes one wrong step... A muffled boom rolled beneath the stone field. Dust forced its way upward in a cloud. Tiny rocks rattled down the slope like glass beads. Endoro's muscles tensed. The old tunnels beneath the plateau lay something even the scientists didn't know. A network of old cavities where water once flowed thousands of years ago. Prehistoric channels carved by rivers long gone. The illegal drilling had punctured them. The pumps upstream had drained their pressure. Now, without water to support them, they collapsed inward like lungs losing air. The ground didn't forget weight merely by accident. It forgot because the memory layer, foundation, had been stolen. Endoro lowered his head, sniffing. A deep growl rumbled from his chest. He took one step towards safer ground. And the earth ahead of him shivered. A crack streaked across the plateau's surface, thin as a hair, stretching all the way toward the central monolith. Pebbles rattled, dust jumped. Endoro jerked back. Below, Kabiru yelled, "It's spreading! It's heading for the central pillar!" Rangers scrambled to reposition their vehicles. Amina grabbed her radio. "HQ, this is critical. The plateau is unstable. Repeat, unstable. We need evacuation of the lower valley immediately. Static came back first. Then, evacuation in progress, but we have a problem. There's a herd of buffalo blocking the south route. Amina swore under her breath. Herd animals sensed danger differently. Sometimes they fled, sometimes they froze. Sometimes they moved into danger simply because instinct told them to cluster tighter. Endoro stepped closer to the central stone, not accidentally, but deliberately. He remembered something. This place wasn't merely a vantage point, it was part of his territory. He had slept under these stones as a calf. He had rubbed against them during mating seasons. He had watched storms roll in from here. He tilted his head, listening again. Another tremor, small, but wrong in rhythm. This one was vertical, not horizontal. A compression shift. Lian looked up sharply. Everyone back. That's an upward buckle. But Endoro was still too close. A section of ground behind him sagged suddenly, forming a shallow bowl. Dust poured into it. A fissure opened with a groaning, tearing sound. Endoro spun, scrambling away, but the edge crumbled under his rear foot. He slipped, slid 2 meters, and caught himself only by hooking his horn against a protruding rock. His heart hammered, his muscles strained. He hauled himself back up, inches from collapse. Rangers gasped below. Even they understood how close it had been. Amina whispered, "If that rhino falls through, that whole sheet will go with him." Kabiru nodded. "He's too heavy for the weakened crust." Endoro wasn't stupid. He knew the ground had betrayed him. He moved backward toward the safer stones, step by heavy step, planting each foot carefully, testing before committing his full weight. Every step sent a shiver through the plateau. Every shiver answered by a deep groan. The ancient stones vibrated. Not magically, mechanically. Warning. The poacher's secret. At the far edge of the plateau, a different sound rose. Engines. Dirty engines. Old engines. A group of 5 figures emerged from the shadows of the stone forest. Poachers, not the collapsed ones, but more of their team. They had come searching for their missing partners. Their silhouettes grew sharper as they climbed the lower ledge. One of them pointed upward. "There! The big one! That's the horn they want!" Another spat. "The ground's unstable. Move slow. We get the rhino. We go." Amina saw them first. Her face hardened. She raised her rifle, not to kill, but to warn. Kabiru shouted, "Poachers! On the ridge!" The poachers ducked behind rocks. One lifted a long-range dart rifle. Endoro heard the click. A memory surged. His mother falling from a dart shot, legs buckling, eyes rolling white, collapsing into mud. Poachers cutting at her horn while she still breathed. He had been a calf, helpless, watching. His heart thundered now. He pawed the ground. A dart whistled through the air. Endoro lunged sideways, but the dart struck the stone beside him, splintering the surface. Lian yelled, "He can't run! The ground won't hold!" Endoro didn't run. He lowered his head, prepared to charge. But the ground ahead fractured. Tiny fissures shot outward like lightning. Charging meant death, and he understood that instinctively. For the first time in his life, the rhino held position. Still, silent, waiting. The great shift. The plateau moaned. A long guttural sound pulled from the earth's throat. The stones vibrated harder. Dust cascaded. Birds fled in screaming flocks. Kabiru shouted, "Everyone, get back! It's happening!" Amina grabbed a megaphone and screamed, "Move! Move now! Get away from the plateau!" Even the buffalo herd far below reacted, breaking formation and stampeding south. The poachers stumbled, trying to retreat. But the ridge beneath them collapsed. A wave of dust exploded upward. Stones tilted. A slab of earth peeled away like cracked bark and slid in a long grinding roar. The ground no longer remembered weight. It rejected it. But the central stone, the largest of all, remained upright, and Endoro stood beside it. As the earth moved around him, as chunks fell away, as dust engulfed everything, the Rhino pressed his massive shoulder against the monolith. It didn't save the plateau, but it stopped the stone from tilting. Just enough. Just for long enough. Rangers below stared in awe. If the central monolith had fallen, the entire slope would have avalanched, burying the lower valley, animals, vehicles, everything. Endoro pushed until his muscles trembled, until the tremors slowed, until the ground settled into a new warped shape, and then, exhausted, the Rhino collapsed to his knees. Dust swirled around him. The world went quiet again. The plateau had changed forever, but it had not fallen. Amina whispered, "He held it. He actually held it." And Kabiru said softly, "The ground remembered weight again because he reminded it." Endoro breathed slowly, deeply, ears flicking weakly. He wasn't dead, just exhausted. Below, rangers approached slowly, carefully. Above, the stars returned to the sky, and the land, shaken but alive, waited for dawn.